Hello, Jepoy Vlogs. Today, I'm going to talk about an American superhero action movie called Ant-Man. You're ready for Ant-Man 3D, and you're ready for Scott Lang's hot wang to stare you in the face. We should return it to the starting points first. The initial scene starts in 1989 with the presentation of Hank Pym, a famous physicist and entomologist. He works at the world's best defense research facility. Right now, he has discovered magical particles that can shrink or grow someone. Hank has even made a suit out of these particles, which he thinks will help the country fight terrorists and, of course, perverts. However, Hank is completely opposed to the SHIELD superiors' plans to use the technology to create superhumans for their own benefit. So to hold the innovation back from falling into some unacceptable hands, Hank lives behind the SHIELD. That doesn't work that way. Assuming that Hank created it while working for Safeguard, it would have had a place with them. This magnificent bull sets up his own business, Pin Technologies, with his daughter Hope and a man named, several years later. Hank continues his investigation, but he conceals the suit and its technology from his employees as well. Sadly, Darren learns about it one day, and after much planning, he begins plotting to drive Hank out of his own business. He at last wins. Hank is compelled to leave and Darren is made the new chief of Pym Advancements in the current day. Darren calls the elderly person to his office and divulges another suit he is as of late planned. He refers to it as a yellow jacket. It would appear that this suit shares all of the characteristics of the one Hank had designed in 1989. Now that he has tested it on some real people, Darren plans to start mass producing it if it works. The old man is frightened by this because he fears that if the bad guys get their hands on the suit, it could destroy everything, but Darren doesn't seem to care. He wants nothing more than to make money. Somewhere else, a convict named Scott Lang is being set free from jail following 3 years in bondage. He wound up in prison after scandalously burglarizing his own boss. He was likewise pulled over different times for looking too damn provocative. Scott is gotten by his old accessory Lewis and on the way. However, the latter reveals that he is a brand new forum for heists. Scott will not be a piece of it, saying that he would rather not dishearten his girl any longer. The next day, Scott applies to a few positions. However, whenever he is turned down due to his criminal record, he spirals into depression. Unfortunately, Scott's ex-wife Maggie and her new cop husband Paxton immediately asked him to leave. Maggie warned Scott, telling him that if he wants to see their daughter, he will need to get a decent job and pay child support. Dejected, Scott storms out of the house and later calculates how much money is required for child support when Scott's daughter Cassie is the only ray of light in his life. It is a ton. He hesitantly chooses to hold hands with Lewis and partake in the heist. In the following scene, Lewis briefs Scott about his main goal, in which he should burglarize an old researcher's home. Hank PM Scott, an expert at such robberies, immediately admits that night that he climbs the fence, removes the window sensors, and then proceeds to the basement by opening a window after unlocking the basement door. It appears that there are a lot of valuables and high-end gadgets there that would sell for millions on the black market. He discovers a second door that has fingerprints on it. Fortunately, Scott is prepared for these kinds of situations, so he cleverly lifts the fingerprints with some of his tricks and finally opens the door. Because of the high level of security, Scott thinks something very valuable is inside the door, but to his dismay, all he finds is a strange red suit. He has no idea he has broken into Hank Pym's house, who has been keeping an eye on him since he was at Pym Technology. Darren is endeavoring to contract to the smallest level. Sadly, he ends up killing the poor in the process. The experiment is deemed unsuccessful, but Scott is determined to continue the tests elsewhere. He brings the suit home and puts it on in the bathroom. He then presses a red button on his hand, and when he does as such, he out of nowhere psychologists to the size of a bug. To exacerbate the situation, Lewis enters the washroom and turns on the fab what goodness the tap, causing a tsunami for the less fortunate. Scott tries to press the button with all his might, on the other hand, hoping it would restore him to his original form, but without success. As a result, he simply runs for it and slips through a crack at Scotland's on the lower floor, where hundreds of revelers are having a party. He manages to avoid being crushed, but he falls again through a crack into another room, where he is sucked into a vacuum cleaner, chased by a rat, launched by a mousetrap, and finally crushed through a window and landed on top of a car. Scott decides to return inside the compound after the impact finally returns to his original size, confused and scared by the incident that night. However, as soon as he enters, he is surrounded by police officers. Scott is detained and arrested. Paxton tells Scott that he has disappointed his daughter once more. Shortly after, another cop arrives and tells Scott that his lawyer has arrived. Scott is surprised because he has never contacted a lawyer. When he goes to find out who it is, the scientist Hank is waiting for him. The old man reveals that he has been watching Scott ever since he left jail. In order to entice Lewis to his home, he purposefully disseminated the rumor that it contained priceless possessions. In fact, all he wanted Scott to do was steal the suit and try it on. Scott is given two choices by Hank. As Scott returns to his confused self, an army of ants suddenly arrives with the suit, and he doesn't think twice about putting it on. The next second, he shrinks in size, just like Scotland did when he escaped the prison and a flying ant was waiting for him outside. He gets on it right away and tries to ride it through the streets, but he can't. He passes out as a result of the high speed and nausea. Scott wakes up at Hanks's house with Hope and a bunch of ants watching him later. The old man summons him to the dining room and reveals that he was chosen due to his unique ability to sneak into places undetected. Get your act together, Scott, you've never seen a flying hat before. Hank then explains to Scott everything about the suit's history, including how he plans to stop Darren with it. To accomplish this, Hank wants Scott to go to PM Technology and steal the yellow jacket while he's there. While he's there, Scott will have to delete all research records so that Darren can never replicate the technology anywhere else at PIN Technology. Hope is alarmed when Darren finally manages to shrink a sheep to the size of an insect. Therefore, she immediately tells her father about it. Meanwhile, Scott thinks the mission is too risky, so he tells the old man to get help from the Avengers. The Avengers refuse, saying they don't want Tony Stark to get his hands on the technology. He says that doing so for the benefit of humanity. Scott is finally persuaded by this, and he begins practicing martial arts and learning how to control ants in preparation for the mission. Additionally, he improves his timing by repeatedly shrinking and growing back. In one case, Hank stops him from shrinking any further by altering his suit. The old man claims that if he shrinks any further, he will reach subatomic size and enter the quantum realm, where time and space concepts are irrelevant. Phase 4 is required for that scat. Once he enters this realm, there is no going back. We must wait until the writers run out of good ideas. Hank knows all of this in light of the fact that in the year 1987, his significant other Janet likewise messed up the same way during a mission. She contracted her size more than she ought to have, and right up till now she has been caught inside the quantum domain for the main mission. Scott is instructed to locate a piece of equipment that the mission will necessitate. The main issue is that this hardware is watched inside the Vindicator's central command. In spite of this, Scott heads to the. When he meets Sam Wilson, the Falcon, he initially politely requests the equipment, but when the Falcon declines, they fight. It happens for a few minutes, yet in the end Scott shrivels, enters the Hawk suit and obliterates it from within. After this, he recovers the gear and makes a run for it. Later, as Hank and Scott are examining their best course of action, Darren shows up there. He illuminates the elderly person that he has effectively tried his suit and will offer it to a purchaser. Before leaving, cocky Darren invites Hank to witness the sale, which will take place in a high-security building where even the vents will be sealed with microscopic mesh. You can't enter because I sealed it off, but here's an open invitation to hear everything. Scott calls a Lewis for assistance because he is aware that the mission will be more difficult than anticipated. In any case, in the following scene, what the hell is Lewis going to do? The group makes the necessary preparations and gets ready to steal the yellow jacket. Lewis steals by lowering the water pressure inside the and pretending to be a security officer. Scott figures out how to sneak inside the structure alongside his anti-companions. On the other hand, when the buyer shows up, it turns out that he is an executive from Hydra, a notorious criminal organization that could take possession of the yellow jacket. Mankind will be at a serious gamble. Scott, on the other hand, goes into the server room to plant a bomb in the system. At first, he tells his aunt and friends to damage the building's security system and burn all backup data. After that, he goes to the transaction room and gets ready to steal the yellow jacket. However, as soon as he lunges at it, Darren enters the nick of time and traps Scott inside a glass cage. It turns out that he was well aware of their strategy and had been following Scott for some time there. He then pulls out a gun and gets ready to finish the fight. However, Scott immediately breaks free and punishes the Hydra agents severely. They are in the process of shooting Hank in the chest and then aiming for Scott, but the resilient ants appear and prevent him from firing. Realizing that he will be defeated, Darren somehow moves away with the bag containing the after some time. Additionally, Scott pursues him after putting an end to all of the Hydra agents. Hank gives Hope this tank keychain and requests that she immediately increase its size as the bomb that was planted in the server room is about to explode. So the father and daughter get out of the building before it collapses elsewhere. Darren gets out of the building in a helicopter, but soon he sees an army of ants approaching. It turns out that Scott was also able to board the helicopter, so in a state of panic, Darren pulls out his gun and fires at Scott. But because Scott is so small, none of the bullets can do anything. Because Darren has no other choice, he puts on the yellow jacket and shrinks to Scott's size. Soon after, the two tiny people start fighting for supremacy. They soon fall out of the helicopter and land in a pool. However, the fighting does not end there. Scott throws Darren into a light bulb and electrocutes him, but Paxton arrives and makes an arrest just as he is about to end the bad guy. Darren wakes up and decides to take vengeance on Scott by going after his family. Can his wife hand over his plans? While Scott is being led to the police station by Paxton, Scott learns that someone has broken into his house. The two quickly arrived at the station and discovered Darren holding little Cassie hostage. Scott is enraged by this, so he shrinks once more and starts fighting the bad guy, despite his best efforts. Darren continues to repel his attacks. At this point, Scott comes to the realization that in order to defeat the Yellow Jacket, he will need to shrink even further inside of it. He is aware that there is no turning back, but for the sake of his daughter's safety, he continues with his plan, which succeeds. As soon as Scott enters the suit, he destroys it from within, rendering Darren inert. However, as a result of this, Scott also becomes entangled in the quantum realm, where all that surrounds him is an endless vacuum. He tries to use the button on his hand, but it doesn't work right away when he hears his daughter talking. He becomes motivated to leave the location as a result of his crying. He uses the equipment he stole from the Avengers base to rewire his suit after recalling it. This is surprising to work. He is able to return to the normal world, though I have no idea how it works. Scott quickly embraces his little girl and simultaneously the police additionally show up, in any case. Hank and Scott are discussing the events of last night while Hank sees his bravery pact in covers for him, allowing Maple time to shrink and escape in the final scene. However, the elderly man is still perplexed as to how Scott managed to escape the quantum realm, is now optimistic that his wife can be brought back as well. The movie comes to a close when Lewis meets up with Scott and tells him that the Avengers want to hire him. Turn on notifications, please subscribe for more videos like this, and like the channel to support it. Thank you very much for watching.